The penthouse lights usually went dark by midnight, but that night a soft glow lingered from the far corner of the vast living room. Amara bent over a worn calculus textbook, the desk lamp throwing a faint circle of light across the pages. Her hands were steady as she scribbled notes on a pad, though her cleaning cart still stood by the marble counter. She thought she had at least 2 more hours before Victor returned from his charity gala, time enough to finish this chapter without anyone noticing. The silence of the room gave her focus, the hum of the city beyond the tall glass windows somehow reassuring. She never wanted this job in the first place. An economics graduate with high honors, Amara had applied to more than 50 firms and banks in the city, only to be met with polite rejections or no response at all. Every interview seemed to end with the same condescending tone, as if her background disqualified her before she even spoke. She finally decided that if doors would not open, she would find another way inside. That decision brought her here, mopping and dusting around Victor Caldwell's penthouse for 6 months, all while paying careful attention to every careless scrap of paper, every conversation overheard, every document left unattended on a desk. Victor was one of the city's wealthiest real estate moguls, known for his towering developments and ruthless control of the market. He loved to boast about the power he held, power that was often maintained not by skill, but by manipulation and corruption. Amara had seen enough to know his empire was built on shaky foundations, but gathering proof required patience. She had practiced patience every single night. She scrubbed champagne stains from his floors or polished the crystal glasses his guests left behind. Tonight was no different, except that she had allowed herself a rare indulgence: to study under the soft light, to remind herself she was more than a cleaner in a uniform. The sound of the elevator doors opening froze her hand mid-sentence. Her eyes darted to the clock. It was only 1 in the morning. Victor was not supposed to be back this soon. She quickly closed the book, but not fast enough. His footsteps were sharp against the marble, each one echoing with authority. He stopped at the edge of the room, eyes narrowing as he spotted the open notebook and the stack of papers on the desk. "What is this?" he asked, his voice carrying that mixture of arrogance and disbelief. "Are you studying?" "In my penthouse." Amara swallowed hard, trying to remain calm. I was just finishing my shift. The room was empty, and I thought you thought?" He cut her off, his words like a whip. "I pay you to clean, not to sit around pretending to be a scholar. Do you think this place is a library? Do you imagine you belong here, among numbers and books?" His tone was mocking, dripping with disdain. He walked closer, snatching the book off the table and flipping through its pages with exaggerated curiosity. "Calculus? Really? That's ambitious. But let me save you the trouble. People like you don't solve equations like these. You wipe the dust from people who can." The sting of his words pierced her chest, but Amara stood tall, refusing to let tears betray her strength. She had endured far worse in silence. This would not break her. "I was only using my break time," she said softly, hoping to de-escalate. Victor's eyes hardened. "You're fired. Effective immediately. Pack your things and leave. I don't want to see you here again." The room felt colder suddenly. Amara closed her notebook carefully, sliding the pencil into its spine. She did not argue, though anger burned quietly in her veins. She gathered her cart and moved toward the service door, her heart pounding but her mind steady. If Victor thought dismissing her meant silencing her, he had underestimated her more deeply than he could imagine. On the ride down in the service elevator, Amara pressed her back against the wall and let the silence hold her. Fired. Just like that. But strangely, she felt no despair. Instead, there was relief. 6 months of meticulous work, of cleaning while memorizing passwords left carelessly on sticky notes, of gathering contracts stuffed into drawers. Her mission was already complete. Tonight's humiliation was simply the final push. He had thrown her out, but he had also freed her hand. She returned to her small apartment in the heart of the city, the hum of traffic outside her window soothing her frayed nerves. She placed her calculus book carefully on the shelf, then opened the small locked drawer of her desk. Inside were folders, USB drives, and handwritten notes, each one containing a piece of Victor Caldwell's empire, each one a crack waiting to be widened. She touched the documents with reverence, almost like a sacred trust. She remembered the first day she decided to apply for the cleaning job. Her friends had laughed at her, saying it was beneath her degree. But she knew opportunities often wore strange disguises. She told no one about her real plan, because secrecy was her shield. Every mop stroke, every late night, every overheard conversation had been part of a bigger picture. Now that picture was nearly complete. Still, she could not do it alone. She knew the risks. Powerful men like Victor did not fall quietly, and exposing him without protection could be dangerous. As she lay in bed that night, the glow of the streetlights cutting patterns across her ceiling, her mind returned again and again to one named Julian Cross. He was an investigative journalist known for exposing corporate frauds, a man who had paid the price for his integrity with lawsuits and threats, but who never bent. If anyone would believe her, it would be him. Amara slept little, her dreams haunted by Victor's mocking laugh and the heavy weight of the evidence in her drawer. But beneath the unease was a flame of determination that no insult could snuff out. She had waited long enough in silence. The moment to act was close, and Victor would never see it coming. The next morning, she walked through the bustling city streets with renewed resolve. People hurried past her, eyes on their phones, briefcases in hand, while street vendors called out their morning specials. Life moved on as if nothing had changed, yet everything had changed for her. She was no longer a cleaner dismissed in shame. She was a strategist preparing for her first real move. That evening, she drafted a short email to Julian, her fingers trembling slightly as she typed. She introduced herself not as a cleaner, but as an economics graduate with access to information that could dismantle one of the city's most powerful moguls. She attached a single scan page and an incriminating contract to prove she was serious. Then she pressed send. Amara sat back, her breath shaky but her heart steady. Victor had fired her, but he had also handed her the opportunity to strike. The late-night dismissal that was meant to belittle her would become the spark of his undoing. She closed her eyes, whispering to herself words of comfort she had often repeated. "You've got this. It's okay to feel afraid. Just don't stop." She didn't know yet how Julian would respond. She didn't know the storms that lay ahead. But she knew one thing for certain. Victor Caldwell's arrogance had just opened the door to his downfall, and Amara was ready to walk through it. Julian Cross sat in the corner booth of a quiet cafe, the kind of place where people lingered with notebooks and laptops, pretending to be invisible. His eyes skimmed the email for the 5th time, his instincts sharpening with every word. Over the years, he had received countless tips. Half of them were rumors, the other half wild conspiracies. But something about this message stood apart. It was measured, calm, written with the precision of someone who knew numbers well. And then there was the attachment. A scanned contract bearing Victor Caldwell's signature, with payment trails leading to a council member whose approval had fast-tracked one of his controversial developments. It wasn't just incriminating. It was damning that he replied with a single line, "We need to meet. Tomorrow. Noon. This cafe. Sit by the window, and I'll find you." The following day, Amara arrived 10 minutes early, her notebook clutched like a lifeline. She wore a plain blouse and carried an old bag that looked more like a student's than a professional's. Her nerves threatened to choke her, but she steadied herself with slow breaths. When Julian entered, she recognized him immediately from his byline photo. Sharp eyes, a little tired, but with the kind of focus that made people believe their truths mattered. He slid into the seat across from her, his gaze direct but not unkind. "You're Amara," he said softly, as if confirming she was real. "Yes." Her voice wavered, but she forced herself to hold his gaze. "And you're the only person I trust with this." She opened her bag and pulled out a thick folder. Julian's hands stilled as he accepted it, flipping through the pages one by one. They contained contracts, invoices, email printouts, each piece carefully cataloged. He looked up, his expression unreadable. "How did you get all this?" "I worked in his penthouse," she replied. "As a cleaner. For 6 months, I watched him carelessly leave documents behind. Overheard conversations he thought no one paid attention to. I copied, noted, and gathered. This is only part of it. I have more at home." Julian leaned back, studying her with new respect. "You took a cleaning job to investigate him?" Her lips curved in a wry smile. "I took it because no one would hire me despite my degree. But when I saw the chance to do something bigger, I decided to use it. Victor Caldwell thinks I'm invisible. That's his mistake. Julian chuckled, though it was tinged with admiration. You're braver than half the whistleblowers I've met. And smarter. But you understand, going public with this won't be easy. He has lawyers, influence, and money to silence people. I'm not afraid of silence, she said firmly. I've lived with it long enough. I just need someone who can amplify what I've found. Someone who knows how to fight him in the light. Julian tapped the folder thoughtfully. Then you've come to the right place. From that moment, their alliance began. Days turned into weeks of late-night meetings in safe corners of the city. Amara would arrive with another folder, another USB drive. Sometimes nothing more than her handwritten notes on conversations she had memorized word for word. Julian cross-checked everything, reaching out to trusted sources who could verify the details. Slowly, a picture of Victor's empire emerged, a web of bribery agreements with city council members, secret partnerships with construction companies that inflated costs, insider deals that robbed honest businesses of fair competition. One evening, as they sat surrounded by papers in Julian's cramped office, he muttered, "This isn't just corruption. This is a blueprint for how the city was stolen piece by piece." Amara looked at the maps they had pinned to the wall, red strings connecting names and dates. And the worst part is, no one ever questioned him. They saw his wealth and assumed it meant respectability. They never looked deeper. Julian turned to her. "Until you did." Those words lit a warmth in her chest, though she brushed it aside quickly. There was no room for pride yet. The work was far from done. Still, there were moments of lightness amidst the intensity. Once, while waiting for a printer to spit out pages, Julian tried to brew coffee on an old machine that sputtered more steam than liquid. Amara laughed, the sound spilling out unexpectedly. "You remind me of my aunt trying to bake cookies at midnight." The smoke alarm went off, and we all ended up eating burnt dough with ice cream. Julian grinned. Burnt coffee, burnt cookies, it's a tradition of people chasing impossible deadlines. Laughter softened the heaviness of what they carried, reminding them they were human, not just soldiers in a shadow war. But danger was never far. Twice, Amara noticed a black car idling near her apartment. Once, a man in a suit followed her halfway down the block before disappearing into a crowd. She grew cautious, changing her routes, carrying her evidence in separate bags so if one was taken, the rest survived. Julian urged her to stay alert. Victor's people are not fools. He'll suspect someone is digging. Still, they pressed on. After 2 months, the evidence had become overwhelming, a mountain that no lawyer could dismiss as coincidence. Julian drafted the first outline of the exposé, a series of articles that would hit the city like a storm. He read the opening lines aloud in his office one night. Victor Caldwell, the man hailed as a titan of real estate, has built his empire not on steel and concrete, but on lies, bribery, and the theft of public trust. Amara listened, goosebumps prickling her arms. It was happening. The silence she had endured, the insults she had swallowed, all of it was turning into power, into words that could not be ignored. Yet even as hope swelled, doubt whispered in the corners of her mind. What if it doesn't work? What if they twist it, say it's fake, and he walks free? Julian set the papers down and looked at her, his voice steady. "Then we try again. And again. But I've seen enough to know this will land. You've done something incredible, Amara. You've built a case stronger than any court could wish for. And when it breaks, the city won't look at him the same way again." She held onto his words like an anchor, steadying herself against the tide of fear. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe change was possible. Not just for her, but for every person dismissed, underestimated, and silenced. And so, with each passing day, their work edged closer to completion. The mountain of evidence was ready to tumble, and Victor Caldwell had no idea the storm was gathering. At his doorstep, the morning the article went live, the city awoke to headlines that thundered across every platform. Victor Caldwell exposed, bribery, fraud, and the fall of a real estate titan. The exposé stretched across 10 pages, each line carefully documented with evidence Amara had gathered and Julian had verified. Screens lit up in offices and homes. Commuters clutched newspapers with wide eyes, and social media erupted with outrage and disbelief. For decades, Victor had been untouchable, his empire towering above scrutiny. Now, in a single day, it began to crumble. Victor himself first saw the article as his driver handed him a folded newspaper outside his headquarters. He skimmed the headline, and the blood drained from his face. By the time he reached his office, calls were flooding in lawyers, board members, even city officials who once fawned over him. Panic replaced arrogance, and for the first time in years, he realized the walls of his empire were not as solid as he had believed. Meanwhile, Amara sat in her small apartment, the article glowing on her laptop screen. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through the words, each one a reminder of the nights she had spent risking everything. She felt an ache in her chest, pride mixed with fear, relief mingled with disbelief. She whispered softly, "It's out. It's really out." Tears blurred her vision, but they were tears of release, not sorrow. Julian called minutes later. "You did it," he said, his voice breathless with triumph. "We did it. The city finally sees him for what he is." But victory did not come without retaliation. Within hours, Victor's lawyers held a press conference, dismissing the story as lies fabricated by a disgruntled former employee and a fading journalist desperate for relevance. He threatened lawsuits, vowed to crush anyone who dared stand against him, and painted himself as the victim of a smear campaign. Amara watched the broadcast from her couch, her heart pounding. For a moment, the old fear crept in. What if they believed him? What if all her effort crumbled under his wealth and power? Yet her doubts faded when Julian sent her a message. Evidence is stronger than noise. Trust the truth. And indeed, the truth spoke louder with every passing day. More outlets picked up the story. Financial watchdogs launched investigations. Protesters gathered outside Victor's gleaming towers, holding signs that read "Stolen homes, stolen trust, and no more kings of concrete." One by one, business partners severed ties, investors pulled out, and the empire began to rot from within. Then came the subpoenas. The city's anti-corruption task force raided his office, seizing boxes of documents. Footage of Victor being escorted past flashing cameras spread like wildfire across television and social feeds. His once commanding stride looked brittle, his smirk replaced with a strained grimace. He had mocked Amara for daring to study in his penthouse. Now the whole city studied his downfall. Through it all, Amara remained in the shadows, her name protected in the first wave of reports. But soon, whispers spread of the woman who had sparked the storm. Community groups began to ask who she was, and when Julian finally revealed her identity in a follow-up story, her inbox flooded not with hate, but with admiration. Messages poured in from young graduates, cleaners, clerks, and dreamers who had felt invisible in their own lives. "You gave us hope. You proved we matter. You showed them we're not invisible." Amara read them late into the night, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. For so long she had been dismissed, overlooked, underestimated. Now her name carried weight not because she sought fame, but because her determination had broken through. Walls meant to keep people like her out. Opportunities followed swiftly. A major financial consulting firm reached out, offering her a position as a senior analyst. At first, she hesitated, unsure if she was ready to step into such a visible role. But Julian reminded her, "You've already done the hardest job. You fought corruption with nothing but your mind and your courage. Analyzing markets? That'll be the easy part." Accepting the role felt like stepping into a new skin. On her first day, walking through the gleaming glass doors of the firm, Amara carried herself with quiet confidence. Her colleagues greeted her warmly, aware of her story, but she never flaunted it. She simply worked methodically, thoughtfully, proving she belonged not because of what she had exposed, but because of who she was. Victor, on the other hand, faced a spiral he could not escape. His assets were frozen, his developments halted, his reputation shattered. Former allies testified against him in exchange for leniency, and his name became synonymous with greed and downfall. The man who once mocked others for daring to dream beyond their station now sat in courtrooms, his future dangling by a thread. His arrogance had written his own undoing. Amara sometimes caught clips of his trials on the news, but she no longer watched them closely. Her focus was forward, not backward. She poured her energy into her work, guiding young analysts, mentoring interns, and volunteering with programs that helped graduates from disadvantaged backgrounds find opportunities. She knew the sting of closed doors, and she wanted to help. Others pushed them open. At a community event one evening, a young girl tugged at her sleeve shyly. "Miss Amara," she whispered, "is it true you used to be a cleaner?" Amara knelt to meet her eyes, smiling gently. "Yes, it's true. And now you're a boss?" the girl asked, all widening her eyes. "Not a boss," Amara said with a soft laugh, "but someone who worked hard and never gave up. And you can be anything you want to. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." The girl grinned, and Amara felt a warmth spread through her chest. That was the true victory, not Victor's downfall. Not her new title, but the ripple of hope her journey created. As months passed, reforms began to take root in the city. Hiring practices in firms shifted, with greater transparency and diversity programs. Councils that once turned blind eyes to corruption faced stricter oversight. It wasn't perfect change, never was, but it was movement in the right direction. Sparked in part by the courage of one woman who refused to stay invisible. One quiet evening, Amara sat by her window, watching the city lights twinkle against the dark sky. Julian called, his voice light with amusement. "So, senior analyst, how does it feel to inspire half the city?" She laughed softly. "Strange, but good. Sometimes I still feel like that woman with a mop in her hand, sneaking glances at her calculus book. And that's the beauty of it," Julian replied. "You never stopped being her. You just showed the world what she was capable of." Amara leaned back, the glow of the city reflecting in her eyes. For the first time in years, she felt whole, vindicated, free, and hopeful. Victor's empire had fallen, but more importantly, her life had risen into something greater than she had dared to imagine. And somewhere deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. Moral lesson: Amara's journey reminds us that true power does not lie in wealth or titles, but in courage, patience, and unwavering belief in one's worth. She turned silence into strength, invisibility into visibility, and humiliation into victory. Her story teaches that arrogance can blind the mighty while determination lifts the overlooked. Every setback can be a setup for a greater comeback, and no dream is too far when nurtured with resilience. For anyone feeling unseen or dismissed, remember you are capable, your voice matters, and your persistence can change not just your life, but the world around you. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, share it with friends, and comment on your lessons learned below.